When a movie trailer becomes the most hated in years, the most disliked Hollywood trailer since the Snow White disaster, a smart studio does one of two things. It quietly listens, or it says nothing and rides it out. What a studio should never do is the thing they just did with Christopher Nolan's Odyssey. Because faced with a tidal wave of 277,000 dislikes, they didn't listen and they didn't stay quiet. They turned off the comments, they reached over and switched off the audience's ability to talk back. And then the cast went out and started openly mocking the very source material fans were angry about them disrespecting. That's not damage control. That's pouring gasoline on a fire and then padlocking the exits. This is the story of a movie that looked at the most famous cautionary tale in recent Hollywood history, Snow White, and decided to run the exact same playbook. Let's get into it. First, let's establish just how big this is. Because it's not a few angry nerds, it's a genuine, mainstream, mass-scale rejection. Nolan's Odyssey countdown trailer racked up somewhere around 277,000 dislikes, roughly 80% of everyone who clicked. That officially put it in the same sentence as Rachel Zegler's Snow White, the reigning champion of hated trailers, on a Christopher Nolan film. Let that sink in one more time, because it's the whole foundation of this story. Nolan is the single most trusted, most bankable prestige director alive. His name alone sells out theaters. Critics call him a genius, and audiences looked at what he did to the Odyssey, the oldest, most sacred adventure story in all of Western civilization, and downvoted it into oblivion. And the backlash didn't fade after a day like these things usually do. It refused to die. Days later, the biggest voices in entertainment commentary were still piling on. One video breaking it down pulled millions of views in barely a week. This isn't a flash of anger. It's a sustained, growing revolt. And it's worth being precise about what the audience is actually angry about, because the studio would love to pretend it's just bigots who hate the movie. It's not. The anger is about disrespect for the source. This is a story set in Bronze Age Greece, a specific place, a specific people 32 centuries ago, one of the two founding texts of Western literature. And the casting and the modern sheen signaled to fans that the setting doesn't actually matter to the people making it, that the ancient Greek epic they love is being reshaped into something that looks and sounds contemporary, reportedly built on a translation deliberately modernized to strip out the archaic grandeur. To fans, that's not a bold reinterpretation. It's a beloved cathedral being renovated into something unrecognizable by people who seem faintly embarrassed by the original. That's the nerve. And instead of soothing it, the studio went out of its way to make it worse. So here's the moment the studio was standing in. The most hated trailer since Snow White. A backlash that won't die. Millions of people making it clear loudly that they feel the source is being disrespected. In that moment, you have a simple choice. Option 1. Acknowledge it. Reassure people. Maybe show them something that proves the movie respects the material after all. Option 2. Dig in, silence the critics, and double down on the exact attitude that made them angry in the first place. One of those paths leads back toward the audience. The other leads straight down the Snow White drain. Guess which one they picked? Because the first thing they did, faced with all that anger, was reach over and turn off the comment section on the official trailer. Silence it. Take away the audience's ability to say anything back at all. And I want you to really think about what that move communicates, because it's enormous. When a studio disables the comments on its own trailer, it is admitting, in the loudest possible nonverbal way, that it has decided the audience's opinion is a problem to be hidden rather than a signal to be heard. It's not we hear you and we disagree. It's shut up. It's a company looking at hundreds of thousands of its own potential customers, raising a concern and responding by putting duct tape over their mouths. That's not confidence. Confidence leaves the comments on and lets the movie speak for itself. Turning them off is what you do when you know what people will say, and you'd rather they couldn't say it where anyone can see. It's the digital equivalent of a company holding a press conference and then refusing to take a single question. And here's the thing, every single company that tries this refuses to understand. It never works. Silencing the criticism doesn't make the criticism go away. It just moves it somewhere you can't control. And it adds a brand new grievance on top of the old one. Now, people aren't just angry about the casting and the modernizing. They're also angry that you tried to censor them for noticing. You've taken one problem and turned it into two, and the second one, they're hiding from us, is arguably worse because it confirms every suspicion the audience already had. It tells them they were right to be worried because a studio that was proud of its movie wouldn't need to hide from its own audience. The dislikes were a headache. Turning off the comments turned the headache into a story about arrogance and cover-up. That's a self-inflicted wound, and it's a deep one. And if this pattern feels familiar, it should, because it's the oldest move in the failing blockbuster playbook. When Rings of Power was getting hammered, the response was to disable ratings and reviews on the platform for days. Time and again, when a big, expensive, tampered-with adaptation meets an angry fan base, the corporate reflex is identical. Don't address the concern, suppress the ability to voice it. And it has failed every single time. It failed for Rings of Power. It failed across a dozen other productions. Audiences are not stupid. They know exactly what a disabled comment section means, and it makes them angrier, not calmer. So, watching the Odyssey reach for the same broken tool tells you everything about the mindset behind this movie. They didn't learn from any of it. They just assumed they were special. Nobody's special. If you're tired of studios muting the audience instead of listening to it, subscribe, because we keep the comments on around here. And tell me below, what's the last classic you want left alone? I read everyone, because while the studio was busy muting the audience, the cast went the other direction and got louder, in exactly the wrong way. In an interview, one of the film's stars reportedly made a dismissive little joke about Homer, about the actual source material, the 3,000-year-old author whose work this entire movie is supposedly honoring, in a way fans read as smug and disrespectful. Now, I'll be straight. I'm not going to put exact words in anyone's mouth that I can't verify, but the pattern of it, the reaction to it, is unmistakable because we have seen this precise move before, and it has a name now. It's the Rachel Zegler move, remember? Zegler spent the entire Snow White press tour trashing the original, calling the classic dated, mocking the story, rolling her eyes at what fans loved, and it became the poster child for how to torch your own movie before it's even out. Publicly disrespecting the source material that your audience loves while trying to sell them a ticket is commercial suicide. And a member of the Odyssey cast apparently looked at that smoking crater and thought, you know what, let me try that too. And here's why that kind of comment lands like a slap, even a small one. When you sign on to adapt one of the most revered works in human history, the audience is trusting you with something they consider sacred. The bare minimum they expect in return is that you respect it too, that you approach Homer with a little humility, like you understand you're handling a masterpiece that has survived 3,000 years for a reason. So, when a cast member instead treats the source as a punchline, as something to be a little embarrassed by or to score a cheap laugh off of, it confirms the audience's single deepest fear about the whole project, that the people making it don't actually love the thing they're adapting. They think they can improve it. They think they're above it. And that attitude, that faint contempt for the material, is exactly what fans could already smell in the trailer, and exactly what the dismissive comment just confirmed out loud. It's not the joke itself, it's what the joke reveals. So now put the two moves together, because side by side, they form a perfect little portrait of exactly how not to handle a backlash. Move 1. The studio turns off the comments, telling the audience their voice doesn't matter and will be silenced. Move 2. The cast publicly dismisses the source material, telling the audience the thing they love isn't worth respecting. Mute the fans, then mock what they love. That is the complete Snow White death spiral, run step for step. Disrespect the source, silence the critics, double down on the arrogance, and dare the audience to complain about it. Every instinct here is the wrong one. Every move makes it worse. And the truly wild part is that they're doing it on a Christopher Nolan movie, a director with more goodwill in the bank than almost anyone alive, and they're burning through that goodwill at record speed for absolutely no reason. And the maddening part, the part that should genuinely frustrate anyone who loves movies, is how easy the other path would have been. Picture the version where they respect the audience instead of fighting it. The trailer gets hammered, and instead of hiding, the director or the studio steps forward and says, "We hear you. We know this story is sacred, and we promise we have treated Homer with the reverence he deserves. Here, let us show you." And then the cast, in interviews, talks about how honored they were to touch something 3,000 years old, how much they respect the original, how seriously they took getting it right. That is it. That is the whole fix. It costs nothing. It requires no reshoots, no recasting, no changes to the movie at all, just a posture of humility instead of contempt. And it would have flipped the entire narrative overnight, turned angry skeptics into cautiously hopeful fans, and let the actual film make the case when it arrives. That version was right there, available, free. And they chose the opposite of it, every single step. So why can they not just do the easy, obvious, free thing? Why is humility apparently impossible for these productions? And it comes back to the same rot underneath every one of these stories. A certain kind of creative genuinely believes they are improving the thing they were handed. They do not see Homer as a masterpiece to serve. They see him as raw material to be updated, corrected. They think the fans are being precious about an old book, and that once everyone sees their brilliant modern take, the complaints will look silly. That arrogance is the engine of the whole disaster. The disabled comments, the dismissive interview, the modernized source, they are all symptoms of the same disease. People adapting a masterpiece they do not think is above them. And audiences can feel that contempt through the screen every single time. Now here's where I have to be honest with you, because honesty is the whole point of this channel, and it's what separates us from the rage farmers. Is all of this gonna make the Odyssey flop? No, it isn't. And anybody promising you a Snow White-style box office disaster is lying to farm your anger. This movie is going to make a lot of money, probably cross $1 billion worldwide. Why? Because it's directed by Christopher Nolan, the most bankable filmmaker alive, and because it's called The Odyssey, a 3,000-year-old brand with infinite built-in curiosity. Those two forces are so powerful they can drag almost anything across the finish line. The general public will show up out of sheer Nolan reflex, no matter how many comments get disabled or how many dismissive interviews happen. So no, the muting and the mocking won't bankrupt this movie. But that's exactly the trap, because they will use that success to erase everything you just watched. Because here's what happens next, and I want you armed for it. The moment this movie makes its $1 billion, the studio and the friendly press will run a victory lap. They'll say, "See? The backlash was nothing. The trailer dislikes didn't matter. We were right to ignore the fans, right to turn off the comments, right to double down, and look, the money proves it. Our approach works, and that's the lie. So remember the truth when they try it. This movie will make money. Despite the arrogance, not because of it. It'll make money because of two of the most bulletproof names in human history, Nolan and Homer, carrying dead weight across the finish line. Strip those two names away, and a movie that muted its audience and mocked its source would sink like a stone. So when they cash the check and tell you the fans lost, you hold up the receipt. The most disliked trailer since Snow White, and a studio so scared of its own audience that it turned off the comments. The box office is Nolan's name. The contempt is all theirs. Don't let them launder one into the other. Chose instead to run the Snow White playbook to the letter. They turned off the comments to silence the critics, and the cast went out and dismissed the very source material fans were defending. Mute the audience, mock what they love, double down on the arrogance. It'll still make a fortune, because Nolan and Homer are unkillable. But do not let anyone tell you that fortune is a victory for the attitude. The audience wasn't wrong. They saw a beloved masterpiece being handled with contempt. They said so in overwhelming numbers, and the response was to censor them and sneer at them. That's not a fan base that was won over. That's a fan base that was told to sit down and shut up, and that only ever showed up out of loyalty to one director's name and one ancient story's pull. The money is borrowed, the disrespect is earned. and subscribe so you don't miss the next classic they try to fix. This is CineWire. I'll see you in the next one.